Welcome to today's webinar, New Trends and Technologies to Support Walkability and Walking, hosted by the Maryland Department of Planning in coordination with the Maryland Department of Transportation and our many Walktober partners. My name is Michael Bayer. I am the Manager of Infrastructure and Development at the Maryland Department of Planning and host of the Walktober Walkinar series. Walking is an activity that many of us take for granted, but as pedestrian accident rates continue to rise and access to safe pedestrian spaces is diminished, communities are recognizing that walking and improving the walkability of our neighborhoods requires public attention and action. Throughout October, the Maryland Department of Transportation, in coordination with several state agencies and other partners, is sponsoring a series of webinars or walkinars to highlight how we can collectively rally around walking, an activity that is both central to the state's active transportation efforts and a critical component promoting public well-being. This is the third in the series. Thank you for joining us today, and please visit www.mdot.maryland.gov/Walktober for more information about Walktober and to register for the final Walkinar that we will be presenting next Thursday. We are recording this webinar and will be posting it online. All participants today will receive an email with a link to the recording once it is posted. The Maryland Department of Planning also hosts a national webinar series in association with the Smart Growth Network on smart growth and planning topics available for viewing at smartgrowth.org. We encourage you to visit the website and to subscribe to our e-newsletter for smart growth and planning news and to learn about our upcoming webinars. You can also find out about planning initiatives, planning tools, and educational opportunities in Maryland by visiting the Maryland Department of Planning's website at planning.maryland.gov. Viewers of this live event are eligible to receive 1.5 CM credits from the American Planning Association. To log your AICP credits, visit the American Planning Association's website at planning.org, log into your account, and search for the name of today's event, which is New Trends and Technologies to Support Walkability and Walking. You can also search for event number 9207371. And for those who joined us last week, the AICP CM number for Pedestrian Infrastructure Safety and Health was 9206901. All of our webinar programming is listed on the Maryland Department of Planning's CM Provider webpage on the APA website. So to get started today, our speakers are Anat Caspi, Hank Greenberg, and Dan Hudson. Anat Caspi is the principal scientist at the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering and the director of the Taskar Center for Accessible Technology at the University of Washington. Dr. Caspi's primary research areas are in the fields of ubiquitous computing and contextually aware automation. Her research focuses on engineering machine intelligence solutions for customizable, real-time, responsive technologies in the context of work, play, and urban street environments. She has designed, developed, and evaluated sensor and mobile applications for personalized navigation and routing in pedestrian ways, improving personal automated mobility devices, and enhancing automation in play work environments with contextually responsive behavior. Dr. Caspi is interested in exploring different ways in which collaborative commons and cooperation can challenge and transform the current economics of assistive technology and incentivize rapid development and deployment of ethically built accessible technologies. Since 2015, she has been working with stakeholders, including the Washington State DOT, to develop a standard approach for collecting, organizing, and sharing data on active transportation paths, sidewalks, and bike infrastructure. Hank Greenberg is the Maryland State Director of AARP, where he leads an award-winning team of professionals who advocate for retirement security, healthcare, affordable prescription drugs, reforms in long-term care, as well as strengthening Social Security and Medicare. The AARP Maryland team is augmented by a volunteer-led executive council and more than 500 volunteers who actively engage in communities to support family caregivers, fight for affordable and reliable utilities, make it possible for people to age at home, provide fun with purpose through virtual engagement during the pandemic, and work with communities enrolled in the AARP WHO network of age-friendly communities. Finally, Dan Hudson is a trail planner with the Department of Natural Resources Maryland Park Service. Prior to joining the Park Service in 2013, Dan was a staff member at the International Mountain Bicycling Association's Trail Solutions Program for 7 years, where he worked on dozens of trail projects in roles ranging from concept development, design, construction, and project management. Dan is a graduate of the University of Maryland School of Engineering. Following their presentations, our panelists will answer as many questions as time permits. You can submit a question anytime by using the questions tool in the control panel located on the right side of your screen. With that, we are going to start today with another brief video from MDOT Secretary Greg Slater.
Hello. On behalf of MDOT and all our great partners across the state, I'm pleased to introduce the third in a 4-part Walkinar series as part of Maryland's Walktober celebration. Today's panel will highlight innovations and technologies that can help us identify and create safer and more enjoyable walk experiences for people of all ages and abilities. There are advances being made in Maryland and across the country that use technology and help identify safe and accessible infrastructure, improve access to trails and pathways, and help us protect pedestrians in areas where cars, trucks, trains, and buses share the roadways. Today, our panelists will discuss innovative approaches that are being used right now to make walking safer and more accessible. Don't forget to visit our website, mdot.maryland.gov/Walktober, where you can learn more about Walktober and check out resources, events, and more. Thank you and walk safe.
Great. Thank you, Greg. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Anat. Welcome.
Hello. I will share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
I will assume so. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and I feel great to be in great company here. My name is Anat Caspi. As mentioned, I'm the director of the Taskar Center for Accessible Technology at the University of Washington. And before I begin, the polls here are pretty limited. So if you would like to get involved in our project, please consider going to tinyurl.com and filling out this a little bit more extended survey to get involved or just explain your walking preferences. So about the Taskar Center, its mission is to take research done at UW and other universities and develop and deploy it to sustainably offer end products to enhance independence and access to community living for all people and a focus on people with disabilities. And in this presentation, I'll show you tools that are focused on people with mobility limitations, but our tools and our lessons can really translate well to addressing the needs of all walking communities in general. And in particular, I want to tell you about opportunities presented by the uses of our approaches to collaboratively generate data for sustainable, resilient communities. So here we are as streets are about to reopen, and this is a very important moment. We have an opportunity to really reset, reimagine, and reinvent our streets. And we actually have the responsibility, I feel, to take a big picture, holistic approach. What we mean is that this kind of hard reset, this development should consider all social groups and take a real look at issues like equity and accessibility of our cities and towns. And so the OpenSidewalks project is all about that. We are trying to realize resilient, sustainable, inclusive cities, and we really believe that in order to achieve that, we have to standardize and metricize many more aspects about our built environments, and that includes the full bike and pedestrian transportation network. So that is, in a nutshell, the point of OpenSidewalks. And our principles are completely synergistic with the shared mobility principles for livable cities. We're encouraging efficient use of space and assets. We engage a lot of stakeholders, you, in different kinds of decision making, and we really do try to design for equitable access. But whose interests do we serve, and what kinds of questions can we answer? We do have real stakeholders in mind. For example, businesses and service providers want to know, how can we describe safe, accessible routes for diverse clientele to come to our address, to our campus, to fix transit route stations? We have planners who are interested to know, how can we improve the way that we prioritize infrastructure modifications? How do we address equity considerations in our cities and towns? And how do we metricize mobility and access to different services, transportation for different populations? But of course, we also really do try to focus on pedestrians themselves, bikers, other non-motorized mobility users. How to find safe, accessible routes that are tailored to specific abilities, needs, and wants. And what are the different reach in a particular environment? Are those inequitable in different types of environments? And what neighborhoods are the best fit for me, my family, or particular transportation goals? So before we start talking about reopening the streets for social distancing, I wanted to note that in absence of data, people have taken to pretty extreme measures to understand how they might be able to maintain social distancing in different streets. And so obviously this is a bit of a ruse. This individual, in absence of having that information, took to the streets with a 2-meter wide hula hoop in trying to understand what paths are accessible with that goal in mind of social distancing. But really, this really points out to the last 20 years of urban development, where smart growth have brought an effort to create cities that are sustainable. And the focus is on ecological sustainability, but new urbanism really ended up bringing about the concept of walkability, that idea that neighborhoods should support people in walking to transit, walking to their daily tasks. And even though walkability was beginning to be metricized, we're looking at a dome of reach. And this really had more to do with whether specific amenities were geographically close to particular starting points, residences, wherever you land with the bus, as opposed to accounting for whether the infrastructure was actually there to support walking, active mobility, and looking at the active mobility of diverse individuals was completely out of realm for these kinds of approaches. Our city and transportation planners derived from a legacy of work and transportation metrics that really focused on pretty basically non-human concepts of traffic. We are used to metricizing cars, not people. And so transportation data has not really evolved to the point of being able to account for real reachability for walkers and rollers. And so the bottom line is that without understanding where the sidewalk infrastructure is, what are its attributes, and how features are connected on the ground, neither planners nor the public can make travel-centered decisions. And there is really a large gap between what we know about automobile ways and what we know and collect for pedestrians and cyclers. And so let's look a bit for what data is actually there, because some cities have fairly substantial GIS sidewalk data sets, but they're not consistently formatted from one city to the next, or they're not readily accessible to outside users. And that really limits the amount of use that we might get from them. Most cities' sidewalk and footpath information are collected as assets. So that defines that they're existing there, but it doesn't actually connect through the space. And so it doesn't actually support using sidewalk data for routing or for non-motorized travel, for walking or rolling. And therefore, routing directions really ignore the initial or final segments of travel, that first and last mile, as it's called. And even when it's offered, like for example, in Google and Apple Maps, people are treated as slow-moving cars, not taking into account people's preferences and needs about using the infrastructure. And to us, that's a significant gap. So what I'm looking at here on the right is a map of a campus that is trying to offer the detailed information about the infrastructure. And this kind of accessibility map is pretty commonplace in different university campuses, for example. But what we're asking people to do is this inhumane task, because we're asking people to look at each portion of the paths and assess if that portion is accessible or not to them. And then in their heads, construct a complete path that is presumably one that is good for them from a point of origin to a destination. But imagine trying to figure this out. Let's say you need a well-lit, no stairway path at night across this campus. You need to make a lot of comparisons of different pathways and try to keep track of all this information in your head in order to make an informed decision about the best, most accessible path for you. And so I wanted to bring in the social distancing example as just an instance that might make this disservice to walkers and rollers more palpable. So what we're looking at here is a tool that was recently spun up by Melly Harvey, who's an urban planner at Sidewalk Labs. And first I wanted to note that they went through totally non-trivial data maneuvers to clean and turn the type of data that New York City has in order to get these sidewalk lines that we're looking at here. And so after non-trivial cleaning, they have to assess and figure out what the width of these sidewalks are from the shape of the data. And so the city itself wasn't collecting that data. They had to infer this. And so in some cases, these are sort of estimates. But let's focus on the stakeholders, right? We talked about walkers or rollers. How would a family wanting to enjoy a walk in downtown New York while maintaining social distancing might use this kind of information? First, you can look at the map and you get the impression that it's kind of hard to find areas that have no red or orange sidewalks, but it's actually hard to assess whether one area is better than another. And secondly, to construct a potential path to a destination, the family has to look at every sidewalk segment, assess its width, figure out if they're comfortable traveling in potentially not so blue-green areas with potentially sensitive family members on a sidewalk that has that particular width. So given how narrow many of the sidewalks are, they would have to individually inspect many different paths if they really want to remain within the blue-greens only. And integrating this information together is really just looking at one single feature of the environment, right? We're only looking at the width of the sidewalks. We're not even trying to integrate a whole host of other information like lighting or the presence of curb ramps or accessible traffic lights, elevation changes, sidewalk quality. All these things are nothing that we're taking into account right here, but would be something that walkers and rollers with mobility limitations would want to take into account. So integrating all this information in your head is a rough deal. And so what we're trying to do with OpenSidewalks is require this connectivity information and ask, how do sidewalks connect? And we do that in order to build a graph of the sidewalk network, which is what you're kind of seeing here on the right. Just like Google and TomToms do for automobile streets, but we are focused on pedestrians and bikers. And so with a graph like this and attribute information about each portion of the path, we can get away from only asking what's the fastest way to get there, but take a look at how actual infrastructure on the ground will support walkability for different individuals. And this is the part that really allows us to use and reuse the same data, but completely customize the routes to different needs and different travelers. So up to now, I've made 2 points. First, that mapping pedestrian bike paths in a detailed, connected way provides a path to walkable, livable cities. And the second is that in order to satisfy equity and accessibility concerns, we really need a connected graph to describe these paths and how they're connected on the ground, rather than just the path assets. Now let's take a look at how Access Map, which is the tool that we have built, better responds to stakeholder questions and concerns using these frameworks. So we want to acknowledge that pedestrians and bikers have diverse requirements. we make the assertion that agencies and companies often make too many interpretations on behalf of the user, making assumptions about what's accessible to one user versus another. And we say that we can synergistically look at open data and make multimodal trip plans and active transportation can be more attractive when we have these kinds of data. So Access Map is a tool that we built. It's currently offered in 3 cities, Seattle, Bellingham, and Mount Vernon. And what I wanted to point out about these is that these are crowdsourced information. So getting involved with OpenSidewalks means that you can help your city get to the point of having Access Map locally. And so far we have received over 35,000 routing requests. So why should you be interested in Access Map? Well, first, serving pedestrians has to start with human-centric factors, and Access Map will choose a route for individuals based on the infrastructure that exists there to support their trip. And we will also show infrastructure that cannot support the trip. So in this particular example, we looked at the card on the left, which is my personalized card. I've indicated that I don't want to go up hills that have a steepness above 8% grade. So anything about 8%, which I say is my personal maximum, will be colored in the red dotted lines. So it's entirely personalized as far as what the terrain looks like. And then further, when I make these selections, it provides me with routing information that's not the shortest, but it fits the information that I provided in my personalized customization card. And I believe that that's important for a lot of different users who are not necessarily looking just for the shortest path, but one that can serve them best. So going back to the social distancing example, we do want to focus on the fact that we have to be able to move on the fly, and serving pedestrians has to start with these human-centric factors. And we want to look at what are individuals' goals, what infrastructure exists to support that trip, what infrastructure cannot support that trip, and how do multiple factors in the environment impact this experience. So in this particular network, we are not looking at social distancing specifically, but we can leverage this kind of information to look at other aspects of the environment on the fly. And that's why I believe that cities can become more resilient when using these kinds of data, because using the same existing data from Access Map, we were able to spin up a tool like this that allows you to assess sidewalk width within just a few hours. So it didn't take months of building these tools. And taking the most reductionist view, what we're visualizing here in yellow simply shows paths that are available for all what we call normative walking individuals with no limitations on mobility. And the sidewalks in yellow are all the available sidewalks in this portion of downtown Seattle. We can then use the different profiles we have about our average cane user, average powered wheelchair user, average manual wheelchair user to assess how many more or fewer paths. You see fewer and fewer paths are colored in yellow as I advance with these different mobility profiles. So starting again from the we started from the least restricted profile of walking, we advanced to cane, powered wheelchair, and potentially the most restricted would be manual wheelchair. But now let's say we are now in social distancing, we can add this width restriction, and starting all over again, you see the terrain has changed quite a bit already. And so again, advancing through the different mobility limitations, we can see how much more restricted the terrain looks for an individual with a particular mobility restriction, along with the restriction of a minimum 2-meter sidewalk. And if you recall, with the data cities currently don't have, we can just draw a circle radius around the starting point and assume that all points within a certain distance is walkable. And clearly we just showed that this isn't the case. And so now we can really see how poorly that assumption serves people, all people, but particularly people with diverse mobility requirements. And so our goal is really to produce new interpretable pedestrian accessibility metrics that leverage the detailed pedestrian network model that we are currently using in AccessMap. And we can then accurately model step-by-step pedestrian access to and from any given location. So taking this approach, we evaluate sidewalk score by taking that idea, but making it go further in order to look at the questions of our stakeholders that we identified before. So now we added that requirement of the 2 meters width sidewalk, and we choose a particular starting point, and we advance that question that the family was asking about, well, how far can we reach? We really just want to take like a 400-meter walk. Where can we go? What might we be able to reach? And we want to preserve social distancing as our requirement. And so you can see that it's really not just the 400-meter reach of the streets that is applicable to this question, that even the normative walking user has some limitations in terms of what they might be able to reach within 400 meters. Only 1/3 of the 400-meter street extent is available to them if they need to maintain the social distancing along that walk. And then when we continue to compare users who mobilize with cane, with cane in this case, or powered wheelchair users, or even the manual wheelchair users, the picture is definitely quite a bit different. And this is due to the fact that streets running east and west in downtown Seattle tend to be both steep and have narrow sidewalks. So remember that all 4 of those scores are divided by the street network, so they're comparable because they have are using the same street network as the baseline. So we looked at this particular starting point, and we looked at the sidewalk score for the normative unconstrained walker. And in absence of social distancing, to the normative unconstrained walker, it's pretty close to 1, meaning it's pretty close to the street network because Seattle sidewalks downtown are fairly well devised. So they're pretty much sidewalks everywhere. And in this case, we're just unrestricting the 2-meter reach. But you can see that you can start evaluating equity and equitability of the pedestrian network when you look at other mobility profiles that we have had. So in this case, cane users have a little bit less reach, powered wheelchair users have less reach, and then the manual wheelchair users have the least reach. So the family who wanted to take a socially distant walk downtown, or the one that is no longer interested in 2 meters reach, you're still getting a clear view of the available paths from a particular starting point and the ability to customize the assessment to a particular constraint of any family member. And it makes it really clear that the amenities, or what amenities, will be available and reachable under all of these constraints. So we can start assessing, like, can I get to a bank from here? Can I get to a grocery store? Can I get to a park? These kinds of questions are really important for understanding how livable a particular neighborhood might be for specific mobility profiles. So for planners, this view provides a comparable score that allows cities to evaluate equity in different conditions for different travelers. And this depiction can also offer some actionable suggestions as to what streets might be good candidates for slow streets, either in the reopening of streets after pandemic or in general, as more and more cities elect to close or constrain traffic in certain streets to enable more foot and bike traffic. This can really promote active transportation options and more livable cities. So in order for our communities to survive and thrive, they have to be sustainably designed to yield strong, resilient, and equitable places. And OpenSidewalks has created the Access Map and Sidewalks Core frameworks to provide metrics that can help people and cities move in a positive direction with respect to health and equity in public spaces, and specifically looking at non-motorized mobility. Thank you so much for your time today, and we do hope that you will join our study. Back to the organizers.
Now we're going to turn it over to Hank.
Thanks so much, Anat. I really appreciate it. What a great presentation that was. I'm Hank Greenberg, the State Director for AARP in Maryland. A livable community is livable for people of all ages and life stages. It's a community for a lifetime, if you will. AARP Livable Communities supports the efforts of neighborhoods, towns, cities, and rural areas to be great places for people of all ages. We believe that communities should provide safe, walkable streets, age-friendly housing and transportation options, access to needed services and opportunities for residents of all ages to participate in community life. And to do this, we rely heavily on the people who make up our Maryland communities, volunteers who have a passion for AARP's mission. Our organization is founded on volunteerism. In fact, our founder, who is photographed here, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, never received a penny from AARP and dedicated the latter part of her life to improving the lives of others. She's quoted as saying that the human contribution is the essential ingredient. It's only in the giving of oneself to others that we truly live. So with the help of our team of volunteers, AARP works to educate and inspire elected officials, local leaders, planners, and citizen activists about how to identify the community's specific needs and then create and implement the programs and the policies and the projects that will help meet those needs. Toward achieving that goal, we create and manage programs. We've got toolkits, how-to guides, and a collection of easy-to-use and understandable printed and online materials. More specifically, as an advocacy organization, AARP also supports efforts to adopt Complete Streets, also known as Safe Streets legislation, at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as transportation planning, coordination, and funding that addresses the needs of all residents, including those who live in rural communities as well. And most importantly, AARP educates and engages volunteers and residents of communities around the state so that they can support positive changes that make their communities livable for people of all ages. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. To talk about the journey, and I'm going to talk about one single AARP volunteer in Howard County, Maryland, whose personal experience, his gifts as a communicator, and a self-proclaimed health nut led him to work locally with his county to create opportunities for residents to get up and get out through walking initiatives. David Conway, an AARP Maryland Executive Council member, has spent the last year and a half educating himself, connecting with leadership in the county, and creating plans for increased and safer walking options. I'd like to ask you a question. The vast majority of people age 65 or older want to remain in their current home or community as they age. Here's this poll question for you. How many Americans are currently age 50 or older? The question will be either 1 out of 3, 1 out of 5, or 1 out of 10.
Great, thanks, Hank. So it is available for folks to respond to. If you're having trouble, you may need to exit out of full screen mode, and we'll leave it open for another 45 seconds or so. We are getting responses in, Hank, and so as soon as we get the responses, I'll read them off to you.
Terrific, thank you.
Give folks a few more seconds to respond here, about half
Yeah,
done so.
I should have planned for some musical background for this. Da, 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 you know.
Exactly. Okay, so the response is 53%, 1 out of 3, 46%, 1 out of 5, and 2%, 1 out of 10.
Well, we've got a very educated audience here today. It is 1 out of 3. And by 2030, 1 out of every 5 people in the United States will be 65 or older. So the question is really, will your community be ready? David and Howard County are working hard through their AARP age-friendly designation to ensure that they in fact are ready. Boomers and millennials alike share an affinity for places that offer a shorter commute, proximity to shops and services, a mix of homes, a mix of incomes, and robust public transit options. But in too many communities, it can be impossible to get around if you don't have a car. In too many communities, sidewalks are few and far between, or as we just heard from Anat, may not be wide enough. For too many years, transportation policies have mostly served people using fast-moving vehicles rather than public transit, or bicycles, or for that matter, their own 2 feet. But a street that's safe for a 70-year-old to cross to shop is safe for a 7-year-old walking to school. Complete, smartly planned streets and transportation options are great for people of all ages. I've got another poll question for you. In your opinion, what is the most important aspect of making your community livable? Is it number 1, safe, walkable streets, number 2, affordable housing, or number 3, access to social activities and entertainment? And I'll wait for your results.
Yes, so it's open, and folks who had trouble with it the first time, it'll be the same solution by exiting the full screen. And people are responding here. We'll give you another 20 seconds or so. Give everybody a chance to. And thanks to everyone who is responding. We'll close it in a little bit. So for this one, 59% said safe walkable streets, 29% said affordable housing, and 12% said access to social activities and entertainment.
That's great. Thank you so much for participating in that. And it's going to be very helpful to us to hear what you all are thinking as well. The formula for what makes a community livable isn't particularly complex. For the most part, the features and the needs are fairly simple. In a livable community, people of all ages can go for a walk, cross a street, ride a bike, get around without a car, live safely and comfortably, work or volunteer, or enjoy public places, socialize, spend some time outdoors, be entertained, go shopping, buy healthy food, find the services they need, and make their city, town, or neighborhood a lifelong home. Now, David, an active member of the volunteer AARP Maryland Executive Council now for more than 2 years, he grew up very active, having participated in various sports as a young man and spent his 43-year professional career in surgical device sales. And that history has informed his current belief that being physically active is one of the most important steps that people of all ages and abilities can take to improve their health. Now, David's mother, who is well into her 90s, is an anomaly. She has never slowed down for a minute. And when he asks her, "Hey, Mom, how do you do this? How do you do it?" And she says, "I don't know, David. I guess because I always keep moving." She's remained engaged socially, physically, without any major ailments or disease for nearly a century because she's always on her feet. Each year, as is tradition, David's wife and 2 daughters set a date for a miles-long walk through some of the many pathways in the county that they have to offer. And it has become a special day that they all look forward to, for both the memories and also to push their bodies as far as they can together as a family. Now, all of this to say that since joining the AARP Maryland team, David has learned more about the effects of walking on our physical and emotional well-being as it pertains to the prevention of social isolation, which by all accounts is a death sentence. He's come to learn more about his county, and while he treasures the many beautiful and safe pathways that exist close to his own home, he's come to recognize that so many of his neighbors don't have that same benefit of safe travel by foot or by bicycle. In many cases, this is their primary form of transportation. In February of 2019, working with members of the AARP Maryland staff, AARP was introduced to America Walks, and the America Walks Maryland team, coordinated by Nicole Smith at the Maryland Department of Health and Human Services. This national network of state coalitions leads the way in advancing safe, equitable, accessible, and enjoyable places to walk, and provides safe and accessible walking initiatives and design concepts. And shortly after David was introduced to the Maryland America Walks team, an excellent opportunity presented itself. America Walks was offering a walking college fellowship, and David agreed to apply and dive right in. He knew that this personal development opportunity would lead to and inform his future projects on the issue of walking and safe streets in Howard County. The 6-month course ended with the goal of each participant developing a community-based walking action plan for a specific community. Well, David sprang into action. He finished his fellowship in September of last year, with Walk Maryland Day quickly approaching in October. He immediately registered as a walk leader and led a walking group at one of the local 50+ centers in Elkridge. This small walking event spurred David to begin working closely with the local agency on aging to start planning similar events around the country. The goal in mind was to encourage healthy behaviors, thwart social isolation, and bring to light the ever-emerging need for safe, walkable streets for people of all ages. And from there, David began attending the Howard County Streets for All coalition meetings with the Horizon Foundation and Bike Howard and the American Heart Association to push forward an initiative to pass complete streets legislation in the county. David provided moving testimony for the Howard County Council about the inspiration his mother has bestowed him over the years just to keep moving. All of David's efforts have brought him to the present, working with Francine Waters and her amazing team from the Maryland Department of Transportation on Walktober events, and making sure that AARP Maryland, their members, I should say our members, and all 50+ are engaged and educated on the importance of getting on your feet. Small changes can lead to big improvements in people's lives, and we encourage all community members to get involved. Well, while we can't get together right now due to the corona, but from the comfort of your home, you too can advocate and educate your local officials on the importance of making your community safer and more walkable. David is a shining example of how taking your personal passions, your inspiration from your friends and family, and applying it to something you can change. It isn't as scary as it sounds. And I hope you will consider volunteering with us at AARP Maryland, or anywhere for that matter. And you can learn more about us at aarp.org/MD Maryland. And with that, let me just say thank you very much for this opportunity. And I want to turn you over now to Dan Hudson.
Thanks, Hank. Wait, oh, there we go. Going in presenter mode. Let me go ahead and share a screen here for you. There we go. Thank you, everyone. Again, thanks, Hank. My name's Dan Hudson. I am a trail planner with the Maryland Park Service, and I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes today about some online tools and resources for walkers planning their next trail hike. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a few DNR specific resources, as well as some resources available from third parties. Personally, I think the best value of all of these tools is for doing trip research and planning. It's just doing a little bit of homework before you set out on the trail to, so you're making better choices and picking the right loop or the right trail, the right experience for you, getting the mileage right, make sure that if you're looking for a more challenging route, that you're getting a challenging route, or if you're not up for that, to get something a little easier. And the best use of all these tools is the ability they can give you to make best choices before you hit the trailhead. Going to start with a few slides on some resources available from DNR. So if you go to the top level DNR webpage, dnr.maryland.gov, if you look for the services menu, if you're looking on a desktop browser, the services menu is typically on the right-hand side of the page. If you're using a phone or a tablet, you may need to scroll down a little bit. But if you go to dnr.maryland.gov under the services tab, or window, you'll see a menu selection for interactive maps. So if we go ahead and we select that interactive maps icon or choice, it's going to take us to the DNR maps page, which it's a really great resource that the GIS team has put together. It collects pretty much all the maps and online trail information. It's available at the DNR webpage in one easy to reach spot. So I want to talk about a few of the resources we have available at the DNR Maps page. First, if we click on the option for free maps and trail guides, it's going to take us to a web page that collects together the PDF versions of all the paper maps that are available for state parks across Maryland. Currently, the DNR GIS team has created 36 maps for state parks. And they'll all be available for you right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of those just to show you what they're all about. We're going to look at the map for Cunningham Falls State Park. Again, the DNR GIS team uses, they've gone to the trouble of using a consistent look and feel for all of our paper maps, and that's reflected on the PDF versions as well. So once you're comfortable with the symbology and the look and feel used on one map, if you download a map for another state park, you're going to feel really comfortable and at home and be able to find your way around. I want to point out a couple of features of the PDF maps or paper maps that the DNR GIS folks create. First, real important, if you go to the legend box, we can't zoom in here, but if you go to the bottom of the legend box, all of the maps have a printed on or a last edit date. I think it's always encourage folks to check the version of the map that you're using, whether you're grabbing the PDF off the DNR webpage, or you're grabbing a paper copy at your local park office, just to make sure to get a better handle on how up to date the map is. This particular map for Cunningham Falls State Park, I know, was created in this February, so it's pretty fresh and pretty up to date. But not all of the maps are as fresh on that previous page. Some of them are 2 or even 3 or more years old. So definitely encourage folks to get a better handle on just how recent that paper map they're using is. I also wanted to point out that each one of these, the PDF versions of the state park paper maps is geo-located. That's a really nifty feature. You know how if you take a picture on your phone, and the way our technology is nowadays, when you take the picture, information about where you're taking the picture is embedded right into the file. So each one of these PDFs with our maps is encoded in a very similar fashion. That each one of the map PDFs has some information embedded right in the file, which which indicates where in Maryland, the actual physical location in Maryland where that the map is trying to portray. So each one of those maps is geolocated, and that's going to come up in a few slides later in the presentation because it allows us to use some really nifty functionality on our phones and tablets. So that's again, really, I think a really great page for hikers, walkers to bookmark is the page at the DNR website that has all of our latest, greatest paper maps. I also wanted to point out another feature that we have available. So if we go ahead and we click, oh, my browser is, oops, going a little slow here. If we go ahead and if we click on that, it said my sharing is paused. Oh, there it goes, caught up. So if we click on the link for the interactive trail atlas, it'll take us to a really great tool that DNR's GIS folks have created. So it's an interactive map of the whole state, and we can pan around the state and we can zoom in. As we zoom in, additional detail will light up. Again, things are going really slow here, folks. I apologize. Just is not advancing at all. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that delay. So as we zoom in the interactive trail atlas, additional details will light up. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in on the in the trail atlas at Cunningham Falls State Park. That same place where we were just looking at the paper version of the map. So you'll see a lot of similar looking information. We have icons showing location of various trailhead and parking areas. We have indications or locations of individual trails and the blaze colors used on those trails. Again, a lot of really great information. A feature I want to point out of the Trail Atlas, I think it's one of the strengths of the Trail Atlas is that it shows live data. When I say that, what I mean by live data is that it has, the latest, most up-to-date data that's been entered into DNR's GIS system is reflected on the Trail Atlas. As I pointed out, those paper maps, they're only updated every so often. But if you go to the Trail Atlas, you can rest assured that the information on parking and on the trails themselves would be the latest information that's in our database. So that's a really great feature of using the Trail Atlas, and I encourage folks to take a peek at that whenever they're looking to plan their next hike. Another really great thing we can do in the Trail Atlas is if we click on individual features, it'll pop up a window showing details of that feature. Here we've clicked on the Old Misery Trail, that orange trail at Cunningham Falls, and it'll pop up a detail window that tells us a little more information about the Old Misery Trail. So really great. You can dive in and go to a little more details on the various features available in the state park. If you go to the upper right-hand corner of the Trail Atlas, you'll see a few specific detailed little tools that are available for your use. One nice additional feature of the Trail Atlas is you can create your own zoomed in detail maps of a park. So if you're particularly interested in taking a hike right around the Hoke area, the campground area of Cunningham Falls, you can go ahead and zoom right in, get just those trails you're planning to hike on that day and create your own custom paper map of Cunningham Falls. Print that out at home and fold it up and stick it in your pocket and take it with you. I'd also point out that just like the predefined paper maps available as PDFs on the previous webpage, these paper maps that are created in the Trail Atlas are also geolocated. They also have embedded right in there information about where in the state they're trying to represent. And again, I'll talk about that in a few more minutes later in the presentation because some really nifty feature functionality comes along with that. Another thing I point out on the Trail Atlas, so just as you can look at it on your desktop web browser, but you can also look at the Trail Atlas on your mobile device, whether that be a tablet or your phone. You go to that same webpage, dnr.maryland.gov, and if you click on the interactive Trail Atlas link, it'll open up the web page on your device, and all that same functionality will be available on your handheld device. With one addition, if you're using the interactive Trail Atlas on your phone, then you also have the ability to go ahead and turn on the GPS functionality of the phone and have on-trail navigation right there in your hand. So if you click that button in the upper right-hand corner of the interactive trail atlas, it'll turn on your phone's GPS functionality, and a little blue dot will appear on the screen, and it'll show where you are on your hike. This is a screenshot I took a week or so ago when I was out on a hike at the McKeldin area at Taskar Valley State Park. It's a really great tool. Shows you right where you are at any given moment. I would point out that that this particular functionality depends on your mobile device having data service, which is not always the case when you're in the deepest, darkest woods of your local state park. So while it's a nifty feature, I always encourage folks not to count on it. It's always the best practice is always to go ahead and plan ahead, grab a copy of a paper map and stick it in your pocket or in your pack to have with you if you ever in question of where you happen to be. But if you do have data service using that that GPS functionality with the online version of the Trail Atlas can turn your phone into a ongoing navigation tool. All right, so those are a few of the tools available right from DNR directly, but of course DNR, we're not the end all be all. You know, there are lots of really great third-party tools out there, and I wanted to touch on a few of those that I use personally myself. Just a couple of quick comments. This list is definitely not all-encompassing. I'm just giving you a taste. There are plenty of other really great online resources available from third parties. Again, this is just a few that I find useful personally. Also important to point out that just because I'm putting these in the presentation today, this should not be seen as an endorsement of any particular website or app by DNR. But they are, I really do encourage folks to check them out. They do provide some really great functionality. An important thing that a really nice feature that these tools offer that the DNR tools do not directly is offline navigation. So the ability to use your tablet or your phone as a navigation tool when you're out in the woods and you don't have access to data service. So that can be a really nifty feature for folks who are directionally challenged and want to use their phone as a navigation tool. The first web page I want to talk to you about a little bit is AllTrails. Just anecdotally, you know, when I'm out in the parks and I'm talking to visitors about the, you know, how they found out about a particular trail or what tools they use to find out about trails. You know, one that I hear about a lot from trail users, or especially walkers, it seems particularly popular, is AllTrails. So alltrails.com is both a website and an app for your phone or tablet. It has a really rich set of information about trails. Here you can see on the slide. So this is information they're showing about a loop at the Avalon area at Taskar Valley State Park. You can see not only are they showing a map, but they're showing an elevation profile. They have pictures. There's the option for individual users to provide comments on a hikes they've done, whether they liked it or not, to rate the loop. So again, a lot of really great information, some types of information that we don't directly provide in our DNR tools, but can be really helpful to users. So again, AllTrails has a web page, but they also have an app. And the app has the ability to provide data-free offline navigation, which again, as I mentioned, you can download information into your phone about your particular hike, and you can use it in the woods when you don't have data service. So that's a really nice resource. Unfortunately, that data-free service, as well as some of the other deluxe features of AllTrails, are only available to folks who sign up for the pay version of AllTrails, which can be a little frustrating. But if you like the idea of some of those tools, but aren't so psyched on having to pay, I'd encourage folks to also check out Hiking Project. So Hiking Project is very much like AllTrails. It's both a website and an app for your phone or your tablet. Again, it's very similar to AllTrails, provides a lot of the same tools and resources for doing research about your next hike at your computer, you know, beforehand, as well as having an app that you can use when you're on the trail. You know, the app, you know, on your phone, it also, like AllTrails, provides the ability for offline navigation. You can go ahead and download information to your phone or your tablet before you leave your home, and then you can use your device for online or on the trail navigation without the need for data service. So a really great tool. But one difference between Hiking Project and All Trails is that Hiking Project is a free service. So if you like the idea of using some of these resources, but aren't really excited about signing up for yet another service, I'd encourage you to check out the Hiking Project. A third-party tool that folks might want to check out is Avenza Maps, which is available for both iPhone and for Android device. So Avenza is a little different from All Trails and Hiking Project, and it's really just an app. It's not a web page. It has a bunch of information itself about trails and various places to walk. It's really just an app for your phone. But this is where I circle back to those comments I made previously about how the state park maps are geo-located. So this is where that comes in. So if you go to the dnr.maryland.gov and you download a copy of the map for your local state park to your phone, then using that PDF from dnr.maryland.gov along with the Avenza apps, the Avenza app uses that geo-located information to turn your phone into an offline navigation device. You can see in the screenshot here I was on that same hike at the McKeldin area, Patapsco Valley State Park. I have the Patapsco map loaded into the Avenza app on my phone, and here I am. I can navigate through the park with no data service, and it shows me right where I am in the trail system. So it's a really great tool. You know, the Avenza app combined with those predefined state park PDFs, you know, turns your device into a great offline navigation tool for your next walk in a state park. The last third-party tool I wanted to talk to you about is from a site called Strava. Strava, it's a little different than the other tools I've talked about. It's really not a trail site or a resource directly for hiking or trail users. It's more of a fitness app, you know. So people will use Strava and they'll keep track of their walks or their runs or their bike rides, and they'll load them up to Strava. But Strava also provides while it's not directly a trail resource, it does provide some really nifty resources to help their users pick their next walk or their next run. I'm really excited about the Route Explorer, which is a new feature that they added. So you can pop up the Route Explorer on the website or on their phone app, and you can insert a couple of parameters. You can say, whether you want to go for a walk or a run or a bike ride, and you can say, well, how far do I want to walk, and do I want to be on surface trails, or do I want to be on natural surface trails? And you can hit the search function, and it'll suggest 2 or 3 circuits that meet your parameters at your current location. So that's a really nifty tool. Another nifty tool that Strava has, All Trails has something like this as well. And Strava, they call it the beacon, and it's a really nice feature. So when you're out on your walk, you can turn the beacon on in the app, and it'll let a predefined list of friends or loved ones know your last location. So if you tell your family members you're going out for a hike and you'll be back at lunchtime, and it rolls around to 2 o'clock and you're still not home, your loved ones can pop up the beacon functionality link that you'd share with them, and Strava is keeping them up to date of where you've been. You may just have, gotten lost in the moment and extended your hike, but there's a chance that if you had gotten into trouble, then the beacon feature is a way for your loved ones to track you down and to come lend you some help. So again, those are some nice features in the Strava with the Strava tool. Unfortunately, a couple of those features, both the Route Explorer and the beacon, actually, those are features only available to folks who pay the fee-based version of Strava. But one of the tools that Strava offers for free to anyone, and it's probably the tool that I personally use most when doing research on trails and for doing my next hike, is the Strava heat map. So it's a really interesting website that it collects all the information that folks share with Strava, and it provides a map that you can look at that shows like which routes are more popular and more used than others. So, the more popular a trail would be, it's going to be shown on the map in a brighter, hotter color, and less popular trails are shown in cooler, less visible colors. So again, I use this resource a lot personally when I'm visiting a new park, a place I haven't been to before, and you know, I want to go on a hike, I want to go on the best trails, and the data doesn't lie. You know, the trails that are the best are usually the ones that are most used. So you know, I use the heat map tool a lot myself when planning out my next walk, so I can make sure I'm going to the best spots in the park. So again, those are a few resources that are available, you know, online for folks who are looking to plan a new walk in a park they haven't visited before. If you have any questions specifically about trails and state parks, never hesitate to reach out to me. I have my email address on the screen there, and I'm going to turn it back over to Michael for general questions on the session.
Great, thanks, Dan. And thanks to everybody who has sent in questions already. We'll ask our panelists to turn their webcams on. We did test them earlier, so they should be working just fine. And we did get a couple questions about how to submit the questions. There is a chat function, but if you can put them in the questions tab, that's what we use when we're actually doing the Q&A. And thanks to our panelists, we can see them all online. So Anat, there were a couple of questions about that survey that you posted the link to, a couple of related questions. Can you talk a little bit more about that project and how folks can participate and what you're kind of looking for?
Absolutely, yeah. So pretty much anyone can contribute. I will give an example of the city of Mount Vernon. There was basically a very avid walker who was interested in getting an access map spun up for the city of Mount Vernon. This individual, I will name him by name because he was so exceptional. Clifford Snow is kind of our hero for Mount Vernon. And so he decided he was going to map all of the sidewalk infrastructure in Mount Vernon and got a few friends to assist, but mainly he did most of the work by himself. So we work with communities to help in terms of guiding how the process works. And then we were able to spin up an accessmap.io version for Mount Vernon. And we have several users out there that utilize AccessMap, basically getting these kinds of customizable routes for themselves. Very similar to one of the tools that Dan had shown in terms of being able to ask for specific trails of a particular length, you know, with specific constraints. So I encourage people who have the time and our avid walkers are interested in contributing to data-driven tools. All of the data is openly shared in OpenStreetMap and will be attributed to the contributors.
Great, thank you. We have a question from our colleague Gladys Hurwitz over at MDOT. Is there any opportunity for this information to be incorporated with walkscore.com? These metrics could be especially useful to people to decide which communities they should be moving to for walkability and accessibility.
Right, is this question directed to me? I'm happy to answer it, but I want to make sure. Okay, so not to monopolize the space, but WalkScore does not actually take into account the connectivity of the pedestrian infrastructure. And so you kind of take that middle ground approach. It's not fully the dome approach that I showed. That's just like as the crow flies sort of sensibility. So obviously we're not going that far, but they take into account the road network. So we have done studies, I didn't have time to show it today, where WalkScore is actually pretty high because the proximity of amenities, grocery stores, banks, whatever, is close. But the actual infrastructure for pedestrians is horrible. And so sidewalk score will show where those areas are, where you have crappy quality surfaces, or things have not been maintained, or there are poles smack in the middle of a sidewalk, and that abridges the way that individuals with strollers or any mobility devices might be able to get around. So we are not quite in concert with the philosophy of WalkScore to be able to share that data, but we openly share all of our data. So if they are interested, they're welcome to use that kind of information.
Okay, thanks. And I'm kind of starting from the beginning, and not that, which is why the questions are going to you. And if the others want to add to that, they can, they want, if it's relevant. But here's another one for you. The access map seems to be targeted towards large metropolitan areas. Has this app been used in smaller cities, like 50 to 100,000? And if so, can you identify these cities that we can do research on?
Sure, yeah, so Mount Vernon is actually a rural city center, so it's a very small community in the middle of sort of agricultural land. If anybody's ever come to the state of Washington to see the tulips blossom in March, April, and May, they will have come to Mount Vernon, because those are where our tulip fields are, and most visitors come there. So it's a pretty small tourist town in a sort of rural landscape. And I think what's significant about that is that, unlike what I showed in Seattle, where we worked with the local disability community and really found out, using participatory design, how do you travel around here? And what we actually found out is that around Seattle, because it's so hilly, people actually use indoor infrastructure like open public buildings to use the elevators to go from one level to another. So Access Map in Seattle actually incorporates these kinds of indoor paths that will tell you, oh yeah, get in on 2nd Avenue, travel on the elevator, you'll pop out on 3rd Avenue, and therefore you avoided this like 13% grade hill, which is quite insurmountable. And so one of the personalization options that we give is actually time of day. When are you traveling, so that it will route you through the indoor infrastructure only if it is open during that time. So in Mount Vernon, however, the constraints and the way people travel is quite different, and therefore we kind of customize the kinds of routes that are available there in very different ways. For example, there is the option there to travel through no sidewalks, but having enough of a shoulder, because people told us, you know, if you only constrained it to where sidewalks are, we wouldn't be able to get anywhere. So let's at least put gradations on where it's somewhat safe to walk without a sidewalk, and that becomes a personalization option. So I wanted to promote that idea that we really do work with communities to make the assessments that is sort of local to how people travel in that location.
Great. Okay, another question for you. A lot of questions about work and your applications. It sounds like your sidewalk data is built through crowdsourced inputs using the OpenStreetMap. Do you have any experience or know of any strategies for interpreting this location data relative to a state or local GIS-based map or layer?
Yes, so we have consumption tools to take the municipal data. Like Seattle was all using the Seattle municipal data that we did a lot of data cleaning on. For Bellingham, the Bellingham tool was entirely incorporating the Bellingham data. Bellingham's DOT did an exceptional job, I will say, to create that layer with a full connectivity, and we were able to pretty much fully import all of that that data. So we definitely work with city data when it's available in a certain way. And I'm happy to discuss that with any municipality that's interested.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to some other questions. I'll give you a break here. I think this is a question for Dan. Does the beacon feature work in areas where you don't have cell service?
So in my experience, it makes use of the cell and data service as it becomes available. So yeah, it sends out the location when you have service, and then you go into a holler and you lose service, then it's not going to be updated. Then you get up to the top of the hill and it's going to send out a recent update. And I think the beacon both the beacon service on Strava and the locate service on AllTrails both function like that.
Great, thank you. Okay. So Anat, can you share with us again the survey link? We'd like to include it on our slide now so that folks can access it.
Sure, I will. Where do I write this in?
You can just paste it in the chat and we'll include it. Great. And while you're doing that, I'll ask Hank a question. Hank, does America Walks still have a fellows program? And how did David Conway become a candidate, and what did it entail?
Actually, I don't know if they have the continuing defense, but I know that David learned about it through AARP, and we decided we would sponsor him to go to the conference, and it worked out really very, very well. And he obviously got a lot out of it, and we would like, I do hope that they are continuing it. I don't know what's going on with respect to the corona as to how that's working and any changes that have been made as a result. But while I have you, I just want to mention that we have some communities in Maryland that are very focused on age-friendly communities. And, you know, a lot of what Anat is talking about and of going out and Dan, of going out and making and doing some assessment of your own community. The age-friendly program in Maryland, which is sponsored by AARP and the World Health Organization, there are 8 domains. And a couple of them, one of them is transportation, and others civic engagement, and others housing, the kinds of things you would expect from an age-friendly perspective to make sure, communities for a lifetime, if you will. And the first 2 years of the program, you spend doing the kinds of assessment that Anat talks about, you know, what are the streets, are the sidewalks wide enough? Are the streets, is there too much traffic? Are there some bad intersections where pedestrians have been hurt, things like that. So, but it's up to the community to decide what it needs. And so it's a wonderful program. In Maryland, and you can take a look at this online, Montgomery County, age-friendly Montgomery County has been doing it now for 5 years. They spent 2 years doing planning and 3 years doing implementing of specific initiatives to make their communities more age-friendly. And I know that some of that had to do with transportation, some of that had to do with walkability and those kinds of things. Howard County is another one that's now involved, as so is Baltimore County. And then in fact, the city of Hyattsville has also been involved for a couple of years now. And I just recently heard from both Anne Arundel County and the city of College Park, Maryland, that are interested in joining it. There are now over 500 communities across the country that are part of it's called the Network of Age-Friendly Communities from AARP and the World Health Organization combined. And I think it would be useful, because one of the great things about it is when a community says we want to go do it, they'll go look at what other communities have done and like communities. That will be including suburban, urban, and rural communities. And there are many different kinds of communities all across. So you'll find like College Park will probably be looking at, you know, other college towns, because the University of Maryland's major campus is there. So they'll see what kinds of issues have they had and what kinds of things can they face and what can they do about it. So just a little plug for the age-friendly communities program of AARP.
Great. And another follow-up question for you, Hank. How do volunteers get involved in all of this?
Well, it's a great question. First thing you can do is, of course, contact AARP Maryland. That's aarp.org/MD. And we'll give you some information on how you can join as a volunteer for AARP. And once we do that, we'll direct you depending on where you live. For example, we have an advocacy team, we have a mental health advocacy team, we have people who are working on utility issues, on transportation issues, on lots of different issues. So contact us at aarp.org/MD, and we'll find a way to get you involved. If you live in one of the counties that's already involved with the age-friendly program that I was just talking about, we'll make sure that you get connected to the leaders in that community. Understand that in order to join, the top executive of that community must make a written commitment to doing something, moving forward. And so they make that commitment up front. They are given then 2 years to come up with a plan, and then 3 years to implement the plan. And then it goes on, because you're never finished. So it goes on after that. So I'm happy to say Montgomery County was, in fact, yesterday, Montgomery County got their they finished 5 years. They're moving on to do more things over the next 5 years. So great way to get involved with your community. And members of the community know best what their communities need. So we rely heavily on those volunteers to come up with what the ideas are. And it's a great way to become involved and get to know other people who also share the same kinds of concerns about the community.
Great, thanks, Hank.
Sure.
And I think our participants can see that we did add the link to the survey for Anat's sidewalk score study. And we did get a question and following up on that as well. So if people do want to participate in the program, should they contact you directly, Anat?
Just say that you're willing to be contacted in the survey. So.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Okay, here's another question for Dan. Has DNR been doing any research or analysis related to accessibility of park amenities? For people without auto access, it seems difficult to reach some of these great trails.
So definitely, sorry, dog is interfering with me. There's an ongoing program with DNR to partner with local jurisdictions to improve connectivity for folks in the Baltimore metropolitan area through the auspices of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council. There is a Patapsco Greenway initiative where the goals are to better tie in the amenities in the state park to the surrounding communities, and to better incorporate the state park trails in the state park area into the multimodal transportation network. This doesn't mean we're going to pave all the trails in the state park, but it does acknowledge that not everybody wants to or can drive to a state park. So they may be walking in from a trail connection from their local community, or via a rail trail or another transportation surface trail, which has a spur which goes to your local state park. So definitely we got a long way to go, but especially in the metro area parks, that's part of initiative. There's a similar program linking in Seneca Creek State Park to the greater trail network in Montgomery County.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Next question here is, I guess, kind of related to what we were talking about a bit earlier. How is the internet broadband access able to be high quality enough deep inside these parks to enable use of all the features being shown on a mobile device? Does it become limited? Are there communication towers inside the parks, etc.?
Well, I'm going to jump in here just to say that one of the big issues for AARP for other reasons, and this is just one more reason why broadband and accessibility is such an important area, particularly in rural areas. We do have a very active advocacy agenda to bring broadband all across the state. And for health reasons, especially now with people relying on telehealth, and of course, school, kids are home from school, work is, doing school from home. There's a lot of reasons why we need to do it. So this is one more great reason because I love the hikes. I got to tell you, Dan, I love those hikes, and I like to bike. So those bike trails have just been wonderful. So the more and more that you connect them, the better it is for all of us.
Could you repeat the question? I'm having some connectivity issues, and I missed the first part of it, and that it was for me.
Sure, that's okay. So it's, how is the internet broadband access able to be high quality enough deep inside these parks to enable use of all the features being shown on a mobile device? And does it become limited?
So that's why, in particular, the third-party resources in the latter part of the presentation, the key, it's hard enough to have data connection in a metro area park like Seneca Creek or Patapsco Valley, much less if you're visiting a park out in Allegheny or Garrett County. So that's why, especially the third-party tools and DNR via they're creating all their online or their paper maps is being geo-referenced PDFs. It's an acknowledgement that you just can't depend on that broadband connectivity. So the apps that provide offline resources, offline navigation are the key if you want to use your device in the forest in Garrett County. So it requires a little, advanced prep. You download the map for Deep Creek Lake State Park when you're at your house or on the drive to the park. And then when you're back in the woods with no data connection, you can use the official Deep Creek Lake State Park map in combination with the Avenza app. And you have a navigation tool that requires no data service.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Anat, where is your customizable sidewalk data available, such as what you showed for Seattle? Is it public?
Yes, it is public. It's currently available for 3 different cities, namely Seattle, Bellingham, and Mount Vernon. And you can access that in accessmap.io, which is a URL.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question here from Kevin Donahue says, I'm curious about your preferred methodology for converting raster data into sidewalk data. I've used linear referencing and transects once I have the pedestrian analysis, such as PDX in Portland, but actually digitizing and creating the polygons isn't as straightforward, and most municipalities don't have the resources to pay for this. I'm curious to what you would recommend. It seems like there's a lot of potential with EE or other places that host massive quantities of data and relying on them to process the data.
Right. So we actually, the one tool that I showed that I attributed to Melly Harvey was based on planimetric data. All of our data uses centerline data strategies. So those are the ways in which we support all of the data entities and their connectivity as well as the attributes. I realize that both of those collections can become costly for different municipalities, which is why we offer the 2 different ways of incorporating municipal data, but also using the crowd-supported strategies of amending those as they change on the fly. So the example, for example, we would take a whole municipal data set, import it, and then work with a group like Hank was suggesting, where a local group can actually find the discrepancies between the last time the city actually surveyed this information and where it is now, because although we think of our infrastructure as static, things do change, and they change in different ways. Some are changing because they age over time, and some are getting ameliorated when there's building or development in different communities. And so we definitely use the support and help of communities like the AARP in order to continue and to make that data maintained and livable so that we can make these assessments over time, not just like a time-stamped kind of assessment, but be able to improve resources and infrastructure over time as we can see, have bottlenecks changed. Is the connectivity between these 2 neighborhoods now better because this one link has improved? Those are the kinds of questions we hope to be able to support, both for communities and being able to self-advocate for different changes in the community, but also for planners to be able to make those assessments.
Sure. Okay, so we're getting close to 11, and I'll just ask one more question, and we'll have some wrap-up thoughts from you all. But we did have one question related to the OpenSidewalk tool, which is, have you thought about integrating adjacent land use information? Sometimes the best route suggested is not the most interesting walk.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So this is really all about how much information and at what density are we able to offer it. So the OpenSidewalks data standard actually does have land use in it. It's another optional attribute, because the information I showed you in Access Map is really just limited to what we had available in a dense enough fashion to show for the entire city. So as cities are more willing to do, a complete tree assessment for their entire city, or a complete land use assessment, or all, looking at sidewalk quality as a full sidewalk density assessment. So essentially, for a tool like Access Map, it doesn't make sense for us to show that information if it's only mapped for one single neighborhood. However, we recently got funding from the connector bus, which is the transportation vehicles that Microsoft uses for transporting its employees. And so for this employee service, we incorporated all land use to allow for people to move about campus in, a sightseeing kind of fashion, to visit different fountains, so they can make the election to look at different fountain features on campus, or walking by the forest area, so the ability to increase pedestrian delight is definitely embedded in this tool. It's just about the ability to have that amount of data in a dense enough fashion to really be able to compare different areas.
Great, thank you very much. So I think we've run out of time for today, but I just wanted to give everybody kind of a chance to give us some closing words in terms of takeaways from today, and what you think kind of the key messages from your perspective to our folks. And let's start with Hank, and then I'll go to Dan, and then Anat.
Thanks so much, Michael, and thanks to everybody, the wonderful panelists, and thanks to all of you for putting this on together. The message I want to send is that one person can make a difference, and in fact, and two make even more of a difference. And we focused on David. We have a lot of Davids on our team, and I invite people to come out and learn. You can learn something new, you can grow, and it's good for your health to be a volunteer and to spend some time and learn and help improve the community. That's really the message we wanted to send. Livable communities are communities that are for all ages, and we're here to sort of make sure that we have the tools, the resources, and ARP does have a lot online. If you haven't seen it recently, it is it's a snapshot every day, because it changes, just as Anat was talking about, our lives change. We're all aging as a community, and as we do so, we want to do so that we can all live comfortably as time goes on. Thanks very much for having us here.
Great, thanks, Hank. Dan, do you have any closing thoughts?
Oh, there we go, unmuted. Really appreciate folks taking time out of their day to participate in the webinar. 2020 has been a pretty weird year, definitely at state parks. We're seeing visitation numbers, unprecedented number of folks visiting state park, and a lot of those people are out on trails. So we're really excited that people are discovering their local parks. And walking and trail use is probably the most frequently performed activity in a state park. And we encourage folks to, now that they've discovered their local park and discovered how great walking is, to keep it up and stretch your legs a little bit. You've maybe been exploring your local park, but there's lots of really great parks, both state parks and local county parks, national parks Stretch your legs and keep walking. Don't let it go to the wayside once COVID is gone.
Great, thanks, Dan. And I guess we'll conclude with you, Anat. You've presented a lot of great information for us today, and I'm sure you'll get some follow-ups, but I'm just wondering if there's anything you'd like to close with.
Just that for our communities to survive and thrive, they have to be sustainably designed and yield strong, resilient, equitable places. And for that, we need strong communities that contribute to that, because currently state departments of transportation and municipalities do not have the resources to produce the kinds of metrics that we need in order to assess, like, how close are we to the complete street standards that Hank was talking about. So these really are community-led kind of organized efforts, and we're hoping to provide the tools to support these kinds of efforts.
Great. Well, thank you all. And with that, we'll conclude our webinar today, New Trends and Technologies to Support Walkability and Walking. I'd like to offer a great thank you to our speakers for a great presentation, to everyone who attended, and to Francine Waters and Brittany Brothers at MDOT who pulled this program together. The complete recording of today's webinar will be posted online, and our participants today will be sent an email with the link. When you exit from today's webinar, you'll be asked to participate in a short evaluation. Please take a few moments to provide feedback so that we can continue to improve the webinar experience for you. And please join us next week for the final program in the Walktober Walkinar series, Maryland Community Walk Initiatives, Walking the Walk of Maryland's Pedestrian Agenda, which will be next Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. Have a great day.